So the Gemara that we've been learning is Gemara about, we were learning about eating ginger or peppercorns. And we mentioned this type of paste that one had with either ginger and honey. And it was some type of I guess, therapeutic mixture. And the Gemara said that it's called Hemalta, and it is not a problem of bishalakum, or it's not a problem of being cooked by a non-Jew. It's not a problem of non-Jews' pots. And the law was that you would recite a Bari Priha Adama, recite a bracha on this type of, I guess, paste or mixture, on this mixture. And obviously the reason for the bracha ha'adama had to do with the ginger, because the ginger, you're eating the ginger, you're reciting a bracha bar pri adama. And we mentioned that this seems to contradict a statement that we said earlier, that on ginger, you do not recite a bracha, it's not edible. Even on Yom Kippur, if you ate it, you would be exempt. So why would the law be that you would recite, either because you would recite a Bar Priya Adama, shows that it's a food, or from the fact that we are calling it edible raw, and it's not a problem of bishul akum, it's not a problem of a goy cooking it, because it's edible raw. We're claiming that it's not edible. And now you're telling me it's edible raw? So Rashi learns because it's edible raw, that proves that it must be edible. Because we're saying that it's no bishul akum. If we're saying there's no problem of a goy cooking it, it must mean because it really is edible raw. And that would contradict what we said earlier, that edible raw, that we said before, that it's not edible at all. So that's a contradiction. Either you're telling me now it's edible raw, and before we said it's not edible at all, and there's no bracha. And the way Teves learns is the fact that it's really, the fact that it's edible raw is not a proof that what we said earlier is wrong. Because you could say that it's edible raw when it's smeared on top of bread, let's say. Ginger, maybe you could say it's edible raw, but not on its own. On its own, it's inedible. But if you were to mix it with stuff, it would be considered edible, and it's edible raw. It's edible raw uncooked. And if it's edible raw uncooked, Taisa says, so there's no problem bishul akum. But it doesn't mean that if you ate it alone, it would be considered edible and you'd be chayav on Yom Kippur. You'd be responsible for eating it on Yom Kippur. That wouldn't be a proof, because maybe it's not edible when it's alone. But when it's with other items, it's edible raw. You could mix it into a salad. You can mix it into you can put little pieces onto your bread. So it could be, that's not a proof that it's not edible, or that it is edible. It might not be edible. And when you mix it with other stuff, then it's considered edible. So Teves has to come up with another proof why this is a contradiction. So his proof is the fact that you recite a bracha, very pri ha'adama. If you're saying a bracha that it's ha'adama, you're clearly saying it's edible. And this is the main part of the food. So that would prove that it's an edible food, and it's the ikar, it's the main thing. And that would mean that you should be responsible, you should be obligated on Yom Kippur for eating it, and it would be considered a bracha. You see clearly you're reciting a bracha on it. I mean, that itself is the biggest proof. You're reciting a bracha on it. And so the Gemara answers the same answer, that there's a difference of if it's dry or if it's fresh. And the dried would be inedible. Yes, Ben.
But the dry is edible too if it's mixed with wash, with honey and other stuff. It's a spice.
Right, right.
With the same as with pilpelay, you know.
Right.
Dry, you mix it with other stuff, you can eat it.
That's true. That's true. But you wouldn't recite the bracha bar pri adam on.
Okay.
So the fact that you're reciting the bar pri adama only applies to if it's fresh, and that's when it would be considered a an edible food that's considered your chayiv. If you ate it dry on Yom Kippur, you would be exempt because it's really not edible in that state alone. Of course, if you used it as a spice, it is edible, as you're saying, but you wouldn't eat pepper. It wouldn't be it wouldn't be edible on its own, in its own. Okay, so the Gemara then said,
Rabbi,
yes,
I had a question. I actually had this question a few days ago. We're translating pilpulay as pepper, like peppercorns.
yes.
And it's obvious from the discussion that's what we're talking about. But what's the Hebrew or Aramaic word for peppers, like green peppers and red peppers? Like when I first saw the word peppers here, I was thinking those kind of peppers, not peppercorns. So I'm just wondering if there's any, they have the same word in English. So what's the word in Hebrew? Maybe Ben knows for peppers, green peppers, red peppers, or Aramaic. Anybody?
I think pilpula would be a pepper. Pilpulin would be peppercorns, but I might be wrong.
Pilpel is the word in Hebrew.
Right. I'm guessing because there is a term in Hebrew, in Aramaic, pilpula charifta, a hot pepper. And so that hot pepper is not similar to peppercorns. It's more similar to the regular pepper. So that's called pilpula.
That's in Aramaic.
That's what he wants.
Pilpel.
Pilpel, right? Okay. But so I'm guessing that would be the term. But I could pull up my Aramaic dictionary. The only problem is that the Aramaic dictionary only goes one way. It only has the Hebrew word, and it doesn't have an English side to it where you could look up peppers and peppercorns. I can only look up the Hebrew and see if what I'm guessing is correct. So pilpula would be let's see. Pilipa. Basically, what I'm guessing is that it is similar to English, where pepper and peppercorns have a similar word. But let's see. No. It could mean ball, grain, pepper, with a grain of pepper, a grain of salt, pepper trees, pepper mill. Yeah, it seems like it's very similar.
In the Hebrew dictionary, it says pilpel, pepper.
And what about peppercorn?
I don't know what they have for peppercorn.
What about red peppers or green peppers?
Yeah, that's pilpel.
This is not like the perfect way to do the research, but from this from this dictionary, it seems like it might be the same, like in English, similar to English.
Rabbi, the alkali gives
Didn't ask for
gagir pilpel is peppercorn.
Yeah, but he wants to know what would be the word for regular pepper.
regular pepper is pepper, pilpel.
Pilpel.
Pilpel adom, pilpel yarok.
Oh, that's what it would seem. Okay. Anyway, so let's go. Let's get back into it. So the Gemara mentioned that chavetz kedera. We spoke about chavetz kedera, which was this either a mixture of, it was some type of a mixture with flour, oil, and honey. Flour, oil, and honey, and the same thing as daisa. Daisa is a type of porridge. Yesterday I translated it as grits, and I was corrected that grits really means corn, something made from corn. I'm not sure because I looked it up in a dictionary afterwards, and it did say that grits are just coarsely ground grain. So it didn't necessarily mean corn, according to the dictionary I looked in. But if it does mean corn, then I have to say that then the translation here is not grits. But it's basically some type of a coarsely pounded, coarse grain that's pounded with in a mortar. Now the Gemara says that if you would eat that, if we're talking about regular daisa, the blessing is definitely mezainos. It's definitely food that sustains. That's the blessing one would recite. But here we're talking about, it's similar to chavetz kedera. It's similar to this very sweet type of a mixture of flour, oil, and water, and honey. Flour, oil, and honey. So we're talking about a similar type of porridge where you have this, where it's a very sweet. So there's an argument between Rav Yehuda and Rav Kahana. Rav Yehuda says the main thing is the honey, and therefore you would recite the bracha on honey, shahakol. Rav Kahana says the main thing is the flour, of course, and you would recite mezainos. Now, the understanding here is that there has to be some logic. Why would you think that the honey is the blessing would go on the honey? So either because the majority of it is honey, and that's what we're talking about. And even though the majority is honey, but Rav Kahana says, doesn't matter, the flour is mezainos. The flour will make it mezainos. The other way of understanding it is that it's not because of the majority, but because that is the main goal. The main purpose is the honey. And even so, since the flour is also there for flavor and or texture or sustenance, whatever it's there for, it's to add something, it would be mezainos according to Rav Kahana. And the Gemara says, Rabbi Yosef brings, that Rav Kahana's opinion seems correct because Rav and Shmuel also say a similar line. They say anything that has from the 5 grains in it, you would recite mezainos. So Rav Kahana opinion of mezainos seems more correct because we have Rav and Shmuel that seem to go along with him. And what we ended off yesterday was that this is a change from the normal rule. Normally, the rule is that there's ikar and there's tafel. There's something that's the main part of what you're eating, and then there's a tafel, a secondary thing of what you're eating. Normally, the bracha goes on the main thing. So, for example, you're having broccoli and you added salt and a little oil to the broccoli. You recite the bracha on the broccoli, and you're exempt. The oil, the salt, the water, that's all exempt because the bracha is on the broccoli. That's what you're eating. Yeah, that's what your purpose is, right? That's the ikr. So normally it goes by what's the ikr, what's the main thing. And here, what we're saying is that when it comes to flour, something has from the 5 grains. So here, we don't go by the ikr, the main thing, and say everything else is secondary. We actually say this is the main thing. The flour is the main thing, even though it's not so much. It takes on it becomes considered the main thing in the food, and therefore you recite the bracha on the flour. Now, I mentioned the case of Twizzlers yesterday, or licorice, and just turns out that I spoke to someone that I got some information. Yeah, I got some information that someone did some research in Europe about from a licorice company. And the licorice company said that the amount of flour in licorice is 40%. 40% flour.
Wow.
And so there are rabbanim that paskin, there are opinions that say that licorice, the flour is only to bind the sugar together. And therefore the bracha on licorice should be shahako. I always argued with that. I always felt the bracha should be mezainis because I always felt that it's a texture. There's a certain texture that the licorice has. I always felt it should be mezainis, but I know that a lot of people say shahakol on it. But supposedly someone did research now, and they found out that there's 40% flour in it, which sounds that it's definitely giving it some texture. But they did one more point of research. They said that this company tried it once to make a licorice that had no flour in it. They said it was awful. It tasted terrible. And so the flour gives it flavor as well. And so it would seem to me, at least, that based on that research as well, in addition to my own belief that licorice, a big part of it is the flour, but based on that research, definitely think the bracha should be mezainis on licorice. But that's one case. Now there is another. So I guess my main point yesterday was to emphasize something that Teves over here on the bottom, Teves, what he says is that if the purpose of the flour is only to bind, it's only to bind the food together, then it is not considered. Doesn't fall into this category as the main purpose of the food, if it's only to bind. But if it's for any other purpose, to give it flavor, to give it texture, to sustain, whatever if the purpose of the flour is different than for binding purposes, then that would be considered the main it would be considered the main thing, and therefore, if it's not for binding purposes, the bracha would be mezainis. Now, there are 2 other examples that I'm aware of that it becomes very questionable if the bracha should be mezainis. For example, an ice cream cone. An ice cream cone, really the main thing that you're eating is the ice cream. And if it's not a sugar cone, if it's just in a cone, so the bracha they say is just on the ice cream is shahakol. If you're eating it in a tasty sugar cone, then it would be you would recite a bracha on the cone, mezainis, and on the ice cream you would recite a shahakol. But so this is another example. This is an example where you don't recite a bracha on the cone. And that's because it's pretty much tasteless. Now, another case where they...
Rabbi,
yes.
About the ice cream, if you eat the ice cream with a cone, you say 2 brachot or just one?
So it depends. If it's a sugar cone, then
No,
you
if
would
it's
recite...
if it's a plain cone, but you eat the ice cream and the cone.
Yeah, so you don't recite a bracha on the cone. You just recite the bracha on the ice cream shahakol, and you're all set.
And if there is sugar in the cone?
Well,
there's sugar in the ice cream too?
I assume
I don't think it means sugar in the cone. It means
like covered.
a sugar cone.
Yeah.
It's a Michael in and of itself. You can eat it.
It's like a
just
cookie.
Eat it without ice cream?
You can.
Yeah.
Some kids
believe it or not.
What if you do eat it together? That's my question.
So there is a cone that's like a cookie. It's like a darker cone.
So waffle, they call it a waffle cone.
A waffle cone. Thank you. It's been many years since I've had one, but is there
a time that you have to say 2 brachot on it? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, yes? You would recite 2 brachos because it's like 2 separate, yes, 2 things. And then the other case would be schnitzel. And this is a big question. Schnitzel, it has bread, if it's covered with breadcrumbs. So according to the Gemara we just learned, it sounds like the bracha should be mezainis. Right? It's
chicken and breading.
It's breading. So the breaded chicken, you would think should have a bracha on it. The only thing is it seems like there are poskim that say it's such a small amount, such a thin layer, that the bracha should be just on the chicken and not on the breading. It's not. Yeah, it's not so simple.
A meatball, they're not talking about breading like chicken. You mix it into the ground meat so that it's something else. That and challah or whatever is as part of the mix.
Schnitzel. It's not schnitzel. Schnitzel is breaded breast of chicken.
Right.
So you're asking on a meatball
that is mixed in with bread, right? That's the question they're asking.
So with meatballs, the matzah meal is added. Why is it added? If it's added as a binder, then for sure the bracha shahakol. But if you're saying they're adding it in more for flavor, then maybe it would be a mezainis. I don't know. That's a good question. But I mean, I know the bracha generally is shahakol on meatballs.
Right.
I don't know how many people do add matzah meal or flour.
Or meatloaf, where you mix it in mamish with challah. You mix it in with bread, not just with, I believe, I don't know, I'm not so sure.
Yes.
You know what is meatloaf? It's
enlarged tzitza.
Is it like a knish with meat inside? Is that meatloaf?
No.
Meatloaf? Food.
It looks like a big meatball, but it has a lot more bread in it.
The voyage of food. I'm sorry.
It's just mixed with It's just mixed with a lot of bread in it.
Yeah.
It's ground
bread
together, so
onions. You put more than just bread in.
You wet the bread and mix it in.
The bread it makes it more tender.
Interesting. So if I pull up this book over here, I have a book on brachas. So it says here, meatloaf, even with matzah meal as a binder is shahakol.
That's for Pesach.
With breadcrumbs or matzah meal added for taste. So without a kviyas suda, if you eat a limited amount, it's mezainis and ala michya. If this is your main meal, you might have to make hamoitzi on it. In Birkas Hamazon, it says meatloaf.
Yeah.
That is very interesting. And now this is a book from Art Scroll called The Laws of Brochos by Rabbi Forst and Rabbi Twersky. So I don't know. That sounds a little surprising to me, unless it looks like bread. I'm surprised that they would say it looks like bread. Looks like
it's elongated. Yeah, it's elongated.
Brown slices.
I'm going to have
slices off a long loaf.
Uh-huh.
It's like a pumpernickel bread.
Right. Uh-huh. Interesting. So I'll have to pull it up.
Maybe at a restaurant, as prices go up, you're going to have to make more and more mezainis.
Uh-huh. Anyway, so that's the story. So I was talking about schnitzel because this is where, to me, it would seem that it's added for flavor. Why is there breading added? But there seems like there's an argument among the poskim, among the halachic codifiers regarding breaded cutlets, schnitzel. And here he brings in the back over here, he says, according to the usual principles of Iker and Tafel, a mezainos should suffice as the bracha for all the ingredients, since the grain is added for taste. However, since some authorities question whether the minute amount of grain should be considered the Iker, it is preferable to recite a shahakol on the cutlets or flounder first, and then you could recite mezainos, on the breading. Now, ideally, one should recite the shahakol on something else. So what he's saying is that really the bracha should just be mezainos, but he wants to cover the other views, and because the other views say it should be shahakol, he says recite a shahakol first on the chicken, and then afterwards you can recite the mezainos on the crust. But he says, but it's preferable if you recite a bracha shahakol on something else to have in mind the chicken, just in case the chicken should be shahakol, and on the schnitzel, the crust at least for sure, you could recite a mezainos. And now the thing is, if it's a thick crust, everyone agrees that it would be, some of the schnitzels they make for children, the bread is even maybe more. It's so much breading to make the kids want to eat the fish sticks. They have so much breading on it. That would for sure be mezainos according to all opinions. But when it's a thin layer, when it's a very thin layer, that would be maybe where they're discuss. That would be when they're discussing this question. If maybe that thin layer should not be considered important, which seems surprising because our Gemara seems pretty clear that it should be it should be the main. The flour is the main thing, and the only thought I have is maybe because it's on the surface. Maybe because it's on the surface, it would be different if it was mixed in. Maybe then it would for sure be the main thing. Let me pull up. I have another book here on brachas, and let's see if they say anything about schnitzel or breaded. I like some of the books that they leave out the hard ones. It's a hard question. They like to leave those out. That's the
Rabbi. The purpose of the breading is to prevent whatever you're cooking to absorb the oil. We don't want the oil to be in the meat. That's the purpose of the breading.
Really? Oh, they have breaded fish in this one.
Because you're frying it in oil.
Well, I use an air fryer, so I don't get any oil, but this is before air fryer.
I don't understand what you're saying. You're saying that they put the breading on so that it absorbs the oil.
So it doesn't,
but then you eat the...
No, so the
fish doesn't absorb the oil.
Correct. Because there's plenty of oil in fish. You don't need more oil.
Okay. But then the breading has all the oil, so you're eating it anyway.
But it doesn't, you drain it. In other words, whatever way you have of cooking, you pat it down. You don't want oil.
I don't think so. I would disagree. I would say that's why you maybe use the breading, but most people, I would think, I mean, I respect that. I think that's good. That's smart that you're limiting the oil. I just don't think that that's the main reason why by the majority of these restaurants. They want you to have, that they don't care about your
they want
oil.
to fry it, and they want the meat to be tender. They don't want the meat to dry out. So the breading is drying out when you fry it.
Really? So you think that's why they do it with breading, so it doesn't dry out?
Correct.
For later use? You're saying like if they eat it tomorrow, or even now it's going to dry out?
No, even immediately, the meat is more tender when it's breaded.
I think you got to ask a chef.
Yeah, I'm not professional then. All right, then I don't know. Okay, interesting.
Rabbi, can I ask you about can we go
just 1 second? Let me read this thing. Fish breaded, they say the bracha should be shahakol. And most rabbis consulted agree the bracha shahakol. See similar ruling in pre-Toar. There, however, the coating was of flour, not matzah meal. So they obviously have some sources that the breading, very surprising because it doesn't seem to fit with our Gemara. So we're going to have to look more into this, why that is. That seems like there is a valid view. Again, the Art Scroll book seemed to agree with my logic, which fits with our Gemara, that it should really be mezainis, but they want to fulfill the other views. So they say recite a shahakol as well, maybe recite it on other foods, but at least they agree in logic that it should be mezainis, and they tell you to recite a mezainis on the breading for sure. And possibly it even exempts the chicken. But in this scenario, and if you don't have any other food to recite the shahakol on, you should recite shahakol first on the chicken, and then recite a mezainis on the breading. And this way you cover all grounds, because you did not fulfill the obligation of a bracha on the chicken with the breading blessing, because you're reciting the blessing on the chicken first. So this way you don't end up reciting a bracha on chicken after you already fulfilled the bracha on chicken. So that's like one way. But they seem to agree in logic that it should be mezainis. This bracha guide, which they're basing it on this, I guess they consulted other rabbis, and they're basing it on this opinion where it talks about flour and not matzah meal. And they have a similar example, I guess, over there where they say the bracha should be shahakol. So even though there's breading, they're telling you they're saying recite a shahakol. So that is something that we'll have to look into why that is. According to our Gemara, it seems it should be mezainis. Yes, Susan. You're muted.
I don't understand about the paste, the ginger paste and the honey. What are they talking about?
There's something that people used to eat for it's probably some type of therapeutic. Well, I mean,
so it's a medicine. Is what you're saying? It's a medicine.
It sounds like maybe like.
So it's not really a food.
A healthy drink, but it tastes good.
So
and they even tell you to recite the bracha on the ginger. It seems like maybe it's like a sugared ginger. They sell these gingers that they add sugar to, and then you can eat it. They have slices.
Now I know what you're talking
about. Maybe
about.
Something similar to that. I don't know. Okay. So the bracha is on the ginger.
Okay,
you recite the bracha on the ginger, and I guess the honey makes the ginger more edible. Or maybe,
right. Okay, thank you. I
mean, it's edible as it is because it's considered fresh, but I guess the honey may
be edible, but
exciting.
It's not desired.
Right. So the honey helps make it desired. Anyway, all right. So that's we'll have to stop here. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everyone. Zay Gezund.
Rabbi, have a good Shabbos.
Stay safe, everybody.
Yes, good Shabbos.
Thank you.
Shabbos.
Bye-bye.